Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training, and my special guest today is Gustav Strandell, who is the CEO of International Care System. What is the National Care System, Gustav? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a consulting company in the healthcare sector, specializing in nursing homes, but also age tech, care tech, any technology related to nursing and care.
Okay. When I met you, you were running a huge operation, Maihama, at the hospital system there. It was very unusual to meet a foreigner running a Japanese hospital complex system. So that was like, wow, okay. And you gave a talk, I think, in one of the chambers. I forget which one, but I remember thinking at the time, amazing. So just remind us what that was again.
So it was, Maihama Club is still today a company that operates 2 nursing homes with a clinic inside.
Right.
And a training center.
Right.
So it covers everything from home care to end-of-life care, including medical care because of the clinic.
Right.
So Maihama Club still today specializes in what is usually considered the difficult part of caring. Dementia care, end-of-life care, care for people with incurable diseases.
So yeah, I remember that talk was very amazing to me that here's a foreigner running a Japanese, care system in Japan. So let's wind that back a bit.
Yeah.
Give us the backstory on how is it that you came to Japan? How did you come to be running that major operation? This is a big operation, I remember. And just give us a little bit of an understanding of the dots, how they all connect here a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm actually surprised there aren't more of me. And there are, as far as I know, 2 other foreigners who are also at least facility managers of nursing homes in Japan. One in Kanagawa and one in Kobe. It started for me in the 90s when Sweden and Denmark received 100,000 Japanese study visitors. 100,000 people is a lot.
1 year?
No, it's 10 years.
Okay,
so in the 90s, after the 90s. But still, for small countries like Sweden and Denmark, 100,000 people, that's Japanese people coming basically every day to every part of our countries. So I was very curious, what are they looking at? Why are they coming to Sweden and Denmark? Why not?
How did you know they were here? You were in Sweden.
Yes.
I know what you're doing at that time, but how did you discover?
I was a student. I was a student, but I was already going back and forth to Japan.
Oh, why is that?
I was here as an exchange student twice in the 90s.
At high school level? And
high school and university.
High school and university, okay.
So
why high school? How did that come about?
That's a different story, but I did kendo for 10 years. Almost only kendo. I was like one of those, martial arts. I fell in love with this in Japan, and it was
one right here. Mine was karate, not kendo.
Okay, yeah. It's great though, right?
Same thing, right?
Yes, and it really got me hooked, and I made a lot of friends that way. But I also knew I needed a job, and to become a kendo, that's not a job, unless you're a police officer.
That's more like a
way of life,
maybe. A poverty commitment for a pure love of the martial art, I would suggest, rather than actually making any dough. But anyway.
Yeah, no. So I was looking for a job apart, and I just found this area very interesting for other reasons too. I mean, both of my grandmothers had a lot of healthcare needs by the end. Both had Alzheimer's disease, and I also worked in Sweden. In the psychiatric wards, but it gave me the first sort of experience with people who need professional care.
Is this because you were studying nursing or healthcare or systems something in university? That's why? I mean, your Arbeiter is not normally in the psychiatric ward, right, if you're still a student. This is actually in your professional career you started that way?
Not yet.
How did that
I had the pleasant experience of graduating from the Stockholm University East Asian Studies.
Okay.
They could have made that university course for me because everything in there was everything I wanted to learn.
Wow.
But I also knew that almost nobody graduating from the East Asian Studies will end up working with anything related to East Asia. It very rarely, it very rarely led to any jobs.
Right, okay.
You can be a researcher after
Become a
that.
professor or something like that.
Yes,
maybe, yeah.
yes. But so that made me a bit nervous or inspired to early on look for something that could be special for me and that could be beneficial for these two countries I love, Sweden and Japan. And these 100,000 study visitors, you could see them being out there.
All right.
In Stockholm area, for example. So, and I started doing that a little bit, also helping them out. And then, this is, and I also, JETRO office is right there.
Right across the road, yeah.
I went to a JETRO seminar as a university student in Stockholm. And it actually, that also inspired me and made me think that this could be my profession. I've been told that very few JETRO seminars will do that to people because they're usually
having quite a bit to do with JETRO over the years because I was in Australia doing a similar type of role to Australia. And having seen them in action, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, okay.
Yeah, no, I've been
impressive.
told that I'm like the best result of a JETRO seminar. But they actually brought in someone from the outside. I still don't remember his name,
right.
but it was a Japanese businessman who said in Stockholm in what can it be, maybe 1996, 1997? He said, these are the statistics. These are the care needs that will be up here in Japan. These are our challenges, and we cannot solve this on our own. Please help us. And I've never seen that from a Japanese businessman before, although I didn't have much experience yet. But I haven't seen that very much after that either. He was a very special speaker, and I thought, wow, and just then. Internet had just started then, so you could actually look these things up a little bit. Wow, Sweden was the world's most aged nation until 1995. Right then, I was sitting there. And Japan passed Sweden at that time and became number one. So the aging of Japan, unlike Sweden and other countries, did not stop. It just went on and on and on. And you could see in the 90s that, wow, Japan is going to have more than 30% of the population being over 65. And it was true.
And they're also living expectation.
Longevity is number one also.
Quite high compared to other countries. So they're not passing.
No.
They're living, and they've got all sorts of different, as I say, dementia, medical care needs for quite a long period of time.
Yes.
Yeah, my wife's grandmother spent incredibly 10 years in a hospital bed before she passed, into her 80s, into her 90s. Yeah. And what a way to go. I mean, it was just, for me, first time I'd seen that, because in Australia, we tend to pop off quite young down there because we're drinking too much, eating too much, getting into all sorts of trouble down there. Don't have longevity, and that was like, wow, is this the end? You spend 10 years in a bed in a hospital. I mean, my God, there's got to be a better way than this. And so I can understand that the Japanese are recognizing this is not the ideal way to do it.
Yes, exactly. So, and they did have a problem already in the 90s with what is called, bedridden, the bedridden problem.
That was
so because it was very common or normal, considered normal, that you spend your last few years in bed in a state that is not very pleasant for anyone. And even the social cost is high. They still need a lot of medication. They receive care by medical doctors and nurses. The people who have the highest human resource costs are there all the time. So what I found was that they're looking at how to get out of that in Sweden and Denmark. Other countries, Australia too. There was I haven't heard of them lately, but there was a place called the Hammond Group. They did a lot of training for in Australia for Japanese in the 90s. But otherwise, it was mostly Sweden and Denmark.
Well, Australia also, I think, at some point probably didn't have a very good system. And then they started to work on it as we actually did start to live a bit longer.
Yes.
And my mother, in her case, she passed in her early 80s, got dementia at the end, but she also had lung cancer. And her complex, I paying for it myself, put her in a complex, very well organized, beautiful gardens, you know, you can sort of walk around, but don't go outside and get lost. You stay within the compound type of thing, and on care, on staff on care 24 hours a day. And, you know, as the cancer got more invasive and she needed more painkillers, you know, but it was quite a relatively well-organized system, I thought, and it seemed to work well. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go one day, I don't want to be in bed for 10 years. I'd like to go like this, thank you, if possible. So,
So, and what I found after the 90s, and including, I have been to a couple of care facilities in Australia also, not Brisbane, but I changed in Brisbane to go to Ipswich.
Oh, okay.
Way inland.
Okay.
And I've also been to Sydney and Melbourne. But I mean, Australia and Nordic countries and many countries in Northern Europe, I would say, changed the way we provide dementia care or end-of-life care within a community or in an environment which you're used to. As in, not a hospital. You don't spend your life in a bed, in a 4-bedroom, so to speak. But I've seen that every country actually experienced this, and which is fascinating. It was fascinating for me then. It's still now, in a sad way, that every country in China, Korea, Singapore, Vietnam. I've been to these places too. They do the same thing. They are heading now head on to the bedridden kind of care.
Oh, they're going to bedridden care.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
They experience that just like Japan did,
right.
And just like Australia or Sweden or any other country did, maybe in the 70s or the 60s. Yeah. But for various reasons,
they're not making the leap. They're not saying, like normally you'd think in human progress. Okay, we observe what's been going on.
Yeah,
we see the future. Okay, let's not go through the same step-by-step process. Let's just jump that one step or 2 steps and go straight to this, but they're not doing it.
Some do. But I'm very confident that most care organizations do not.
They're not.
Because, and I mean, it's natural in a way. And most nursing homes or care facilities are created by medical organizations. So they're already running hospitals. So even if they want to do care, they tend to still do medical care. And the facility will tend to look like a hospital.
To every hammer, everything looks like a nail, or to a hammer, everything's like a nail, I think.
Yes.
But coming back to your case, so you're in Stockholm.
Yes.
You're observing there's lots and lots of Nihonjin running around the streets of Stockholm thinking, what's going on here?
Yes.
And you start to get an idea from this lecture from Jetro that, okay, there's a real future here. So what happens then? How do you get out of university? You're studying East Asian studies, nothing to do with medical, nothing to do with business, and yet you understand Japan through your kendo and through your time here.
Yeah.
So how do you then bridge into the next phase?
So I kept on going back and forth to Japan, then also for another few exchange studies. And that is when I visited my first Japanese nursing home. And that's in 1997.
And why?
Because I understood that this would be a challenge, and this is I really liked it from the beginning. Caring for elderly, I thought it was very meaningful a thing to do. And if Sweden and Denmark are good at that, and is something we can contribute with, that's great for a young, very maybe naive, but also positive. I really wanted to make a change, to contribute with something. So I found it, I thought. But then I also, of course, found a person. I found an amazing university professor in Japan, who I, of course, met by not by choice, but by chance. So I was doing arbeito in a restaurant in Kichijoji, outside, Tokyo or inside Tokyo. But yeah. And just doing the dishes and helping with the food. And this restaurant owner, he says, well, there's a famous professor here, and you're thinking about doing some kind of study on nursing homes. I think that's his thing. So say hello. That's what I did. So I just washed my hand and said, hello, professor. And he said...
and you could speak Japanese.
Yes, but
which is not normal at that time.
No,
I don't think, for
it was
coming from Scandinavia or Europe.
Sure, we were fewer. But I could. But the thing is, he replied to me, to my konnichiwa, in my hajimemashite, he replied in Swedish.
Wow.
And I still haven't met, I have met, 10, 15 Japanese people who can speak, natural Swedish, almost without an accent. And that just blew my mind. And
that
then
blows my mind.
Yeah, it does, because it's such a minor language. I mean, why would you learn it? I'm happy about it, but but anyway, no.
Well, he's very happy to know one of my team here speaks very fluent Swedish.
Because he or she is from Sweden? No?
As a Japanese student, was married a Swede, and spent a long time educated in Sweden. So they're around.
Okay.
Gustav,
okay. Then maybe I will know 11. But at the time, maybe it was my first meeting someone with that level. So, and of course, he had spent many years in Sweden studying Swedish nursing homes in the 80s.
Oh,
and he wrote
really way ahead of the curve.
Yes. So I found that one pioneer and he was an architect. So he was a professor in architecture in Kyoto University. And he wrote a book that he gave to me. And I still have the book. And it describes how to change the way nursing care is being provided in the community to elderly who might have dementia, end-of-life care needs, and including architecture sketches and the whole... it's like a blueprint on how to change.
How to do it.
And that blueprint is pretty much what Japan is doing all over the country today.
Wow! So
and as also the nursing home that I have with my partner, and the thing is that book was published in 1990.
Wow!
That's 34 years ago.
Amazing. Yeah.
So 34 years ago, he knew what was going.
Is our good professor still with us?
No, he passed away.
Okay.
Yeah, his name was Professor Tadashi Toyama. But he left us early. But until then, he helped me with my first studies on nursing homes, not as an architect, but on a sort of operations level. I wanted to know, and also I'm not sure, it's sometimes, is misunderstood sometimes, but things like care philosophy and values, that, to my experience, the last 25 years really matter, though. So I really found something that if you are serious about changing the way we conduct care, that level is necessary. Today, it's more or less called well-being. It's well-being is not a new word, but well-being is now, I think it's going to be the most widely used term for how to get out of just physical care to all the care aspects that are necessary.
But I think that
for human beings.
That whole concept of the philosophy, the ethics, the values is important, because you do read about cases where elderly people are basically prisoners in these institutions, and some of the people, unfortunately, who work there are abusing them. And these become scandals, and all sorts of ramifications, legal, particularly, are brought to bear on these people, and they shouldn't be brought to bear on them. But if the organization who is running the institution has got the right mindset, right value system, they employ and train people in the right vein, it's not just making money, it's got to go beyond that wellness is human.
Yes.
That's all one line to me. It's not like, we're going to be high value, but actually we're going to squeeze every last yen out of the people here, and we're going to employ people who are the cheapest and get the biggest profit and not do any training. It's like, for me, it's like one thing. If you're going to have that care, then that care means selection, training, how people are rewarded, ethics, values, all that stuff is one unit to me.
Yes.
So I get that picture that is, for me, that's how it should be done. I mean, my mother's in that care when she was alive. I expected that organisation to take totally good care of her, and she'd never have any abuse or any problems with it. Particularly when you start to get dementia and you start to lose the plot, as she did, and can't remember people, can't remember things, then you're in a very fragile,
very vulnerable,
exposed, vulnerable position, right?
Yes.
And you don't want the system to be abusing people in that situation.
Yeah.
And it is a system, isn't it?
Yes.
So what happens then? You met the good professor. You actually started to, and then what happened now?
So then I did master's thesis about
here
in Sweden, but I spent almost all my time here already.
Okay, right.
And I did all the studies here.
Right.
And I got this scholarship. It was amazing. They which allowed me to travel around in Japan from Hokkaido to Shikoku. I think I did a study through 10 cities.
This wasn't Monbusho?
No, it was a Swedish scholarship.
Okay.
Yeah, but mostly given up to PhDs. But I got it, I think, because people understood then that this was going to be important.
Yeah,
and it was very important for me. Everything the study I did it was in 1999 mostly, but I still use it today. The perception, the things I saw and the things I was able to discuss with Japanese specialists in this field was important all the way for me. So
so you did the master's degree in Stockholm, but study field work here.
Yes.
You graduate, and then what happens?
Then I spent something like 4 or 5 months at the Swedish embassy here, right up the street.
Yep.
And as a trainee.
Okay.
And in a magical coincidence, they started a project within the embassy called the Swedish Care Institute. Mm-hmm. If all these Japanese people are coming to study our system, shouldn't we have a hub here that introduces Swedish know-how and assistive devices? The business aspect, of course, was also in there. So I became, that was my job as a trainee, basically, to look into that, to do the studies, to write the report. That institute took a couple of years in order to launch, but in 2003, it started. And the first thing the embassy did was to call me and said, we got the institute, it's going to start. Please come and run it for us.
Come and run it?
Yes.
Wow.
Start the institute.
Okay.
I was 29 at the time. But
who else would be capable enough of doing that, I wonder, if you think about it?
There was one more guy. He's a friend of mine.
but you're talking probably very limited number of people have got the language capability, the exposure capability, the interest capability as well. So you basically self-selected yourself in a way, didn't you, I think?
In a way, the road has been straight once I found it. So the institute, I started as a project manager, but then, and it was just a small institute. We were 3 people at the most. But then we also, a Japanese company wanted to invest in a company doing training. So we started a training company for nurses and care workers. That was in 2005. So that was my first real experience in starting a company from zero with Japanese investment. The company is still around, but took a very big hit during the COVID. So it's now like a non-profit organization or something. So I'm not involved anymore, but it's still around. But my number one customer all the time for during all those years was a Japanese mid-sized company out in Urayasu in Chiba Prefecture, where I live now. So they basically headhunted me. They said, we want you to not just introduce concepts and training and assisted devices. We want you to also do what you say you do, basically. It was like a threat. They said, you talk the talk, but I have you walk the walk. And I hadn't.
Right.
as in being, I hadn't been a manager of a nursing home.
No.
So that's what they offered me. They invited me to be, I think it was general manager or something at the time, for these 2 nursing homes, home care, all these small, but the total number at the most was 220 employees, something like 1.2 billion yen in annual revenue. But that didn't become CEO until after the earthquake.
Right.
They said very bluntly to me, "We thought you'd go home during the earthquake." And I said something really ridiculous, like the captain will go down with his ship if we're gonna make it, and that worked somehow, and I meant it. I didn't go back.
No. I stayed. I mean, a lot of people were told by their embassies to go, and
Yes.
even the Australian embassy, I was amazed. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade gave a note that Australians should pack up and go.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, really? But anyway, that's a separate podcast. I didn't go anywhere. You didn't go anywhere. So then what happens? They decided to make you
the owner of the facility, he asked me to become the CEO. But I did it, I must say, I did it reluctantly because the numbers at the time were very bad. Fully booked, we were still doing red numbers. That's a problem. That should not happen. So there were all kinds of problems, and I just knew this is gonna take a long time to correct. But that was my mission, and lo and behold, it took many years. But when
How many years were you there?
I was there between 2009 and 2021.
Long time.
So it's a long time, 12 years, yeah. But I went through, anything you can imagine in a mid-sized Japanese company, including success, failure, HR problems, which we might talk about also, yeah. I think I experienced all of them.
Well, yes, in 12-year period in a mid-sized company, you're bound to
all
have
of them.
Unless you're in a lucky street, you're bound to have trouble.
No.
And you've got Lehman shocks, you've got earthquakes, you've got pandemics. I mean, just bring it on.
That's actually the big 3 I did experience, yes.
In one business lifetime, who needs all of that?
Yeah.
However,
that was pretty
about,
yeah.
The things you've seen work.
Yeah.
And it's a company.
Yes.
Okay, the theme of the business is aged care, okay, but it's still a business.
Yes.
And it's got a particular flavour to it, and it's not just, grinding out every last yen and squeezing people. There's a duty of care there as well.
Yes.
And naturally, like any hospital or any medical association, medical institution. So how did that work? You were sort of inside the system, and people knew you, and you're working with them. And then one day you're now the CEO, so you make that step up.
Yeah. How
did you make that step up in terms of, like, it's okay, the owner of the company says, okay, well, Gustav's now the president, but the people working there have to recognize you as president and follow you.
Yes.
And what did you find worked well to engage people to follow you?
Yes. I mean, the engagement factor is in any business, but also in care business, you can't live without it. With unengaged staff or unmotivated staff, accidents will happen. So we're talking a very direct link to risk management. So how to cope with this is, of course, it's not a big, it's communication and how to communicate. And in this case, in this business here, it has to be also in Japanese, unless you have some kind of amazing assistant that will be, do everything, all that part for you. It's possible. But it was very helpful for me that I by then I did speak the language, including writing and reading. So that communication aspect was I used training. I used a lot of training in order to communicate. So these monthly trainings that we already had became sort of my thing. So I was very directly involved in the training. I wasn't the speaker every month, but I made sure that this was my opportunity to, when I'm not speaking, I listen, to listen to all these voices from many different professions. You have nurses, care workers, speech therapists. You have, we had our own kitchen. So I had chefs and nutritionists. And all these people know everything they do. They know so much better than I do. So in part of communication, at least in my position and in that industry, I would say, just the sort of humility or acceptance that I am the CEO and I will be responsible for your mistakes if you do them. And I tried to actually let them know that I don't know how you make your food. They made the most amazing food I've ever seen in a nursing home in the world. Fantastic kitchen, for example. And in that kitchen, every problem that I mentioned also happened. But that's, I think, and the attitude to accept that they know more about the actual, what we call it, the gemba, right, in Japanese. Yeah.
The coal face at the work point there.
Yes. So to have that attitude worked for me because I kept asking for advice. But then, of course, if you're just asking and not doing anything, you're not a CEO. So based on that comes the decision.
And the accountability.
Yes. And the responsibility, that aspect of leadership, I think was also of many first-time experiences for me. Because I do believe, especially as a CEO or in any management position, that's what you do. You take responsibility. And therefore you are proactive and you solve problems, for example. But I realized that a lot of mid-management level people that I had, that might be the biggest challenge for them. The unwillingness to take responsibility.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. And that's not just because they're in a medical, area. It's any company in Japan.
Yes, I think so.
Basically, culturally, no thank you to responsibility and accountability. Make your target the smallest possible target. Avoid all the stuff as much as possible, and life's good. And so it's not specific to your industry.
No,
I think that's generally across the board in Japan. But so how do you then help people to become accountable? And also particularly around, you talked before about if there's any problems or mistakes, whatever, that's on you, right? And so handling mistakes becomes very, very critical, how that's done. So how did you approach that, and how, not just from your level, because you as an isolated individual may have a particular philosophy on how you handle mistakes.
Yes.
But unless your direct reports are also replicating that same approach, then nothing works, right? So how do you actually make sure you've got the right approach and then it gets replicated?
What I found was that it's not that middle management I had fantastic middle management too, but and it's not that they were irresponsible, but it's just this reluctance. Please let me say that in a beautiful way. Yeah, there was a reluctance. One to take that responsibility, and so my solution then was, don't worry, I will take the responsibility. But the most dangerous aspect of all this was when they said, yes, boss. They say yes. When I make a decision,
why was it the most
I make a decision, or I ask I ask a question. I want to listen, right? And they maybe sometimes it happened, of course, that people didn't want to speak their mind, for example. Or I make a decision and they say, yes, we'll do it. But many of them might know that it's not going to work. But because you told me and because you're the boss, we will do as you say. And that's on you. And I've worked with such nice people, fantastic people. So again, it's not ill will.
No.
It's just that unwillingness to say anything against the CEO, which, I mean, that can feel great. Oh yeah, they're going to do what I tell them to. Yeah, but it's not great. That's actually the most dangerous aspect, because then you have mid-management who know things are not going to work and still do it. That's very inefficient.
And it's a reflection of, I would say, can be a lack of trust.
Yes.
If I speak up, am I going to be punished? So therefore, my best course of action is not to speak up. And I think for all of us, to have staff who push back and argue with us and disagree with us, particularly publicly, that's a rare thing in Japan.
Yes.
We're all emotional human beings and we don't like it. But if you think about it intellectually, if you've got people like that with you who will debate with you and argue with you and tell you you're wrong, that's like diamonds, It's very rare in Japan to have people like that. So we really have to be appreciative of those things. And I had an example here. We had an all-hands meeting. I got this genius idea and getting told that, no, this is not a good idea. And me arguing, it is a good idea, And they're saying, no, it's not a good idea. And, quite a vigorous debate. And in the end, I said, okay, all right, I'll go with the flow here. And what you want to do, we'll change this part of it. But when it happens, you're not happy. But if you think about it, as say, intellectually, you've got to be happy about it. It means there's a degree of trust that they can speak up. And no, they're not going to get punished or not going to get hurt. Yeah, so that's a good thing. And just on that point about ideas too, like I notice myself, I'm part of Dale Carnegie Global, I speak English, I attend the online meetings with these different teams around the world, I go to the conventions, I go to the owners' meetings, so I get a lot of information, I read stuff in English, I'm plugged into the world. So I'm constantly coming up with ideas. And one of the dangers is that you are the chief idea person in the company, which is fine, but you can't be the only ideas person in the company. If we're not careful, we can sort of overwhelm everyone else with this constant barrage of our ideas. So I have to keep reminding myself, okay, great, and that's good, but you've got to find out what their ideas are too, pal, and work on that. So what have you found that's worked well to get ideas from people?
But that is the answer, though. You have to have other people, who have also innovate and have ideas, but also these people who will, they will actually tell you when you're wrong. I have been very fortunate that I've had that. Eventually, it took many years in this mid-sized Japanese company for me, but eventually we had a team where the management meetings were fantastic, I think, still today, because we had very frank discussions in these meetings. And one more...
Do you think that compared to a normal company, as you said before, if there's an error, that could be fatal or it could be really catastrophic for someone in that medical circumstance. So in a company, you know, if you don't quite get it right, okay, we make slightly less profit, or it takes slightly longer, or eventually we realize, okay, we've got to retool something, you know, whatever, rework something. It's not usually catastrophic. But in the medical field, do you think that willingness to speak up is because people feel, I have an accountability here for the life of someone and the medical welfare of someone, and it's my duty of care to speak up and to make my point so that this person is protected, as opposed to in a company, workers don't have that same sense of it's a catastrophe. If this goes wrong, okay, I'll just protect myself and I'll speak up. So do you think that's a difference in the industry?
Healthcare-related business, yes. I mean, it has that life and death aspect. And also we deal with people dying all the time. We had, I'd say, 15 to 20 people total every month that were in the terminal stage or actually dying. So that's, you know, there's a lot of people in that. And then things happen. So, and then suddenly it's not only a HR issue, it's a relationship with your customers who are usually not the elderly themselves, but family members.
Yeah.
So then it becomes not just how to manage human resources, but also very worried, for a good reason, family members. And I think we had around 200 elderly that we took care of in either in home care or in facility, which mean we had 300, 400, 500 family members that we also dealt with all the time. Some of them will cause problem. And that it is linked to HR in this case because, for example, we had one case where an elderly lady suddenly stood up, fell down, and had a fracture. Had to do an operation in hospital, and then very sadly she passed away after the operation. She didn't make it through the operation, and that we were extremely sad about that. However, we also had an issue with one of the family members who said she passed away in hospital, but it's your fault because she stood up and fell in the nursing home. So we're going to sue you. And that happens also, sadly, quite often in this industry for hospitals and nursing homes. So the HR issue is the staff. They are devastated that because we had great staff and they were sincerely engaged and caring for the residents. And one of them died. And then they're told that the family is going to sue us, and where the whole thing is that they will claim that you did wrong. How do you manage that situation? And but still, that was also simple. Fine, sue me, and I will go to the court, and I will defend my staff and the resident and her right to not be tied to a bed or a chair. Because that would have been the only way to have her never fall. Fall accidents happen. We do everything we can to prevent them, but they do happen. But if you're suing me for, if they had done something very wrong, that would have been different, but they didn't. We had it on camera. So, okay, then we will fight this together. And I will fight. That was good for the staff, I think. That was the solution for them emotionally. And we never went to court.
No.
We settled outside of it.
Settled, yeah. Well, most cases get settled outside, don't they?
But this is an aspect, an HR aspect and a customer relations aspect that might be different for hospitals and nursing homes. If you're, for example, selling software or computers, which is fine, but it's a different life and death issue.
There is. And also, you came from outside Japan. Okay, you speak Japanese, you've lived here, fine. But you're running a very sensitive area in the medical field as a foreigner in Japan. And okay, they make you the president, okay. But how do you build a trust? Now, you talked before about, you're open to people's suggestions, ideas. You're not dictatorial. You appreciate their expertise, but ultimately you've got to make some decisions as the leader. But there's, how did you get people to trust you? Because, if I'm Japanese, I might think, well, the president of this country is Japan. Language is Japanese. We should have a Japanese president, not a Swedish president. So how do you get people to trust you in that role?
In my case, it was a very diligent effort to get to know them personally. It doesn't solve everything, but it was a prerequisite when bad things happened. Like I said, I did experience, especially the mid-management staff that had harassment issues. Zero tolerance, no harassment. It will not be accepted. But dealing with that, again, outside a court, because that's how it could end up. That was because I knew them personally, and I made sure I did.
It's not only the aspect of the legal ramifications there, it's the aspect of a shortage of workers in this industry.
Oh, yes.
A shortage of trained workers, experienced workers, and capable workers. So you're, okay, I'll just fire that person and I'll get another one in there as an option. Not so easy. You fire them rather than try and fix them. You may not have a replacement. That makes the whole equation a lot more difficult. So how did you navigate your way through that?
And that is true. But I think that's very positive in Japan. The fact that we have this, it's going to be rather extreme the next 10, 20 years, I think, in Japan, the staff shortages, not only in healthcare, but especially in healthcare, for various reasons. But there is a positive aspect to that, which is that, yes, we as CEOs or management, how much can we provide, in my case, not just well-being for the elderly, but well-being for you as a staff. I will have to utilize everything I can and know to take care of each individual staff. Because, just like you said, I will not find replacement easily or at all.
But how do you get to that? I mean, you look at most leaders, they spend almost all of their time gravitating between email, meetings, client visits, travel overseas to headquarters or whatever. So if you look at their day, there's lots on.
Yes.
And so how did you find that time to actually have that degree of understanding with someone, to get that rapport with someone at a level that you could build a trust? Because it's theoretically, but reality, if you look at the schedule, and we say this, giving orders is not coaching. A lot of people in business think giving orders is coaching. No, we'll just take that bit out. How much was left in your day, which was actually you coaching someone? I mean, you look at it, it's in nanoseconds. It's so small. But they think they're coaching because they're giving orders. Well, that's a misunderstanding of coaching. So my point is, the metaphor I'm drawing here is that understanding communication, getting to know people is great, but is it actually happening? And then is the time being manufactured and allocated, defended for that activity? Because often it just disappears with something else. So how did you get around that?
Well, the short answer for one thing is that I didn't. I did not do that perfectly. And it was, like you said, it was a great challenge to get to know, 220 Japanese staff. We had 10, 15 foreigners too, mostly from China and Myanmar. Although that is, you can't do it. So, but that is what, if you are able to build up a good organization, that's what the organization is for. I did get to know the mid-management, all of them, on a fairly personal level. And if I can have a good relationship with them, and they actually will tell me what's going on with the other staff, then that's, as far as, it's a start. Like I said, the other way was through training. That I will meet a lot of people during training. I did, after a few years as a CEO, I got this great offer that very knowingly told me to have a nomikai every week with all the staff, drink alcohol. And I don't mind that. And we did have meals and we did go out drinking together. But to do that systematically, I don't think is great because many people don't enjoy it.
I think the younger generation today are not interested. Like, go out and drink with the boss? Forget it.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So
I've got options here.
Yeah. I did that very selectively.
Yeah. What about culture? You come from Sweden, but you know Japan very well. You've got a very advanced system in welfare, generally speaking, in Sweden, in particular in aged care. So you're bringing a certain culture with you to the organization in Japan. What did you find worked well to really get that culture to be accepted and to work in Japan?
Well, first of all, it can be a good thing to be an outsider, right? And that's still my strong feeling. To not be Japanese and to not be the Japanese typical CEO, I thought was great because it gives you some freedom. And it's not on purpose, but there might be a bit of a mystery. This foreign guy, it might be difficult to read even, or what does he mean?
Is that because you're Scandinavian?
Maybe.
I'm being semi-facetious because as an Aussie, often when I deal with Scandinavians, often they are quite difficult to read. And
I think we are, yes. I agree.
You are not. You are quite emotive and you're quite expressive, and I can get a sense of what you're thinking. But in many cases, it's not like that. It's like this sort of very poker face and you just don't know. I had my first experience with, it wasn't Swedish, was actually Finnish. And I had a meeting with this person and I'm trying to, get them excited about something in business. Poker face. So, of course, I ramp it up because I'm not getting anywhere, So I just keep ramping it up, trying to get some reaction.
Doesn't work. No.
And at the end of the thing, I'm exhausted. Like, geez, what the hell the meeting that was? I got no idea what this person thinks about anything. But I'd never experienced that before. And I was like, wow, okay, this is a tough gig. Anyway, so... I digress, but anyway.
It's... in the Nordic countries, we have less facial expressions and we express ourselves differently, I think, and especially the good Finns. Best neighbors we have, but... they are like us, but more. In any way you want to look at it. But coming back to how to be an outsider and utilize that in Japan is you still have to know the language, though, I think, when it comes to organizations with 200 people. But then from an outsider's point of view, it's by the end of the day, it's finding out what's meaningful for you as an individual. You can learn, how you look or how you speak or all these things. But I've had fantastic teachers, elderly people in Japan and in Sweden who, by experiencing a life 80 years, 90 years, the conclusion that I reached a couple of years ago is that's the thing. An old lady, 80 years old, with both physical and psychological symptoms of various diseases, can still tell you, I'm happy. Great.
Yeah.
Please tell me more.
Yeah.
But what many of people, when many human beings who feel happy, although they have all kinds of diseases, is what they're really saying is that they feel every day being meaningful. It could be even, there are extreme cases when even the disease can be meaningful. It created a new meaning for me. To accept every day, to be thankful for every moment, for example. These things I think is very specific for the healthcare area, which you can learn. But for me, that's HR, to find meaning from each individual because meaning creates motivation. So when you understand, for example, your mid-management individual feeling, what is meaningfulness for them?
Interesting question. I wonder, a lot of people are watching these videos on leading in Japan, and I'm leading too, and I just wonder how many of us can actually say, I know, I understand what is meaningful for my direct reports, as opposed to I have a vague idea, or I have an idea which is now being superseded by their own life circumstances changing. And what I thought was relevant for them is passé, no longer relevant. Something else is now relevant, but I don't know because I haven't caught up with that. So this, what you're talking about here at one level, is extremely deep thing. And in fact, as leaders, because we're time poor, technology is not giving us more options. It's taking options away from time usage, speeding everything up. And are we really missing this human dimension at this very core of what life means for the people who work with us and for us, so that we can help them attain the things they want to attain? Or are we just, running around like a mad pirate captain screaming out orders and making people, stand at attention when we walk by because we're incredibly important because we're the CEO or a senior leader or something? I think you touched on something here which, if you go down that route, it's a very deep thing, isn't it?
And difficult. And so it's never, reach for perfection. When it comes to knowing another person, it's difficult enough for a man and a wife, or friends or brothers and sisters. It's it's difficult to know a person on a perfectly deep level.
Yes.
However, to aim for that, to pursue some basic level of knowledge of what feels meaningful for the other person explains so much around that. And if you don't know at all, you haven't gotten anywhere. So
let's throw down a challenge to our viewers and listeners.
Yes.
Have you gotten anywhere in reality? Do you actually know?
I succeeded with some, and I didn't succeed with some. And those I did not succeed with usually left the company.
And this is so. Let's talk a little bit about if you're going to give some very concrete, simple advice, clear advice to someone who is being sent to Japan around their organization, based on your experience. And you've mentioned a lot of things already in the talk so far. So just get you to crystallize a few key pieces of advice you'd give them. What would you tell them?
But because my experience is like this, I would, say, according to my experience, language and culture and in that order. Because
so they should learn Japanese. They should try and understand Japanese culture.
Because basic level everyday conversation in Japanese without these specialist terms, I think is not that difficult. Japanese is difficult, is a difficult language, but that's when you get to special terms and all these words that don't
watch the NHK news, for example.
No, still a mess because they use
difficult because the specialty language across many fields.
Yes.
And they get into some fields you're not familiar with. It's like, I don't have any idea what they're talking about here. That's the news thing. Greg, you've been here 39 years, pal. You should at least be able to understand all of the news. Well, sometimes I can, but other times I'm just like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, I don't think we should go too deep into it, but when you can differentiate the kunyomi and onyomi of a kanji, then you're getting somewhere. Because the onyomi, it makes this the devil's language, according to Xavier, and the kunyomi is poetry. It's just no exceptions, perfectly sort of a beautiful lingual pattern.
And so just for people who don't understand, onyomi are characters that are coming from the Chinese language, the Chinese.
We're not blaming the Chinese for anything irregular here, but yes.
But that's right. So Japan, before they had written word, they had words for everything. So a classic example is yama, mountain. They had a word for mountain. It's called yama. Yes. The Chinese word for mountain was shan. Yes. And at that period of time, whatever centuries it was ago, when they brought the Chinese written language in, that character was read shan, which became sun.
Yes.
So Fuji sun, Fuji mountain, not Fujiyama, because the Fuji is onyomi, so onyomi. So that's the difference of the native indigenous language at one level and the imported Chinese written language at another level. And they both exist here. And so when we talk about Japanese difficulty, you've got to be able to read both.
Yes. But so...
And I studied Chinese at university.
Yeah, did you also go to East Asian Studies? Because that was
I did modern Asian studies. It was called, and I did Chinese as my language at university.
Oh, okay.
We did, and then again, just to make it even more complex, we did simplified Chinese. Putonghua.
Yeah.
So, and that was taking very complex characters and making them simplified so that more people could learn how to read in China.
Right. Yes.
And that's what everything's written in mainland China is written like that. But in Taiwan, they're full-form characters. Hong Kong, full-form characters. Japan, full-form characters. So the levels are levels here.
Yes.
We're digressing into a linguistic study here, but your point is...
No, but learn kunyomi, because then you'll be able to speak.
Yeah.
You won't be able to listen to the news, because that's all onyomi.
Yes,
but
exactly.
That's always my advice to anyone starting with Japanese, because otherwise it's easy to get lost. And Japanese textbooks, they aren't really amazing at this. No. And if I ask a Japanese person, tell me the difference of kunyomi and onyomi, they'll look, what is that? They might say, I've heard of it. It's your language. But let's not get into deep to that. But I mean, any basic understanding.
What other things would you advise? They should be careful or take care of or pay people attention to. Or, what would you say?
But I also to go against the advice I received 25 years ago at the Swedish embassy at a party, some very veteran Swedish business people said to me, you will never have a Japanese friend and they will not tell you the truth. And I received a lot of negative, great advice. I think they thought that. But in my experience, some of my best friends are Japanese, and I don't trust Swedish people more than I trust Japanese people. It's silly. So just to make Japanese friends. And if you do enjoy any kind of alcohol, that will help. It's not even a joke. This communication, nominication is true. So I found, especially when I did studies on nursing homes, that people will tell me one thing during the day, and what they actually meant during the evening after a couple of beers. You don't have to do it that way, but it's a shortcut. There are other ways. For example, finding that cultural amazing aspect of Japan, like for me was kendo.
Kendo, yeah.
But it could be...
You still practice?
No, I do not. Back problems.
Back problems.
Yeah. I'm old. Yeah. I'm getting old, I guess. Yeah. It's my iwake, anyway, my excuse. But I find the 10 years of kendo I did was amazing. And a shortcut into language and relationships.
And also culture.
Yes.
And also understanding hierarchy, understanding being diligent, understanding taking responsibility, understanding being responsible to yourself, taking care of people around you. Because, martial arts, we can hurt people, right? Karate, kendo, san, you can hurt people. So when you don't know what you're doing, you will hurt people. When you do know what you're doing, you're very careful to not hurt people because you know the damage the blow will do. In training, you get hit in training and you realize, man, that hurts. And therefore don't do it to other people because you don't like it. They don't like it either. So you become more careful with each other, I think. So there's a lot of life learnings in the martial arts, I think, in terms of how we treat each other.
Yeah.
Final question. What's your definition of leadership?
But it has to be to create results. Because if you're not creating results, it doesn't really matter all these other nice things that you could be doing as a CEO. So you have to create results. But if you're able to do that in an organization where you know your staff, and when you pursue what is meaning and purpose for the staff, they will help you. Short, nice and short, maybe.
That's how we like it.
Yeah.
Gustav, thank you very much. That was great.
Doctor, it's good. Meet you.
Join us again.
Yes.
For our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.